So at this point in my design, my form starts to go in. And I know this because I'm looking at my scale drawing and I'm measuring how tall my form is. And when I look at my scale drawing at 3.5 inches, the form starts to go inward. And so I'm continuously checking the object I'm making against my scale drawing to make sure that the proportions are correct. So to make this come inward, again, I'm going to place the coil on the inside. And then when I pinch this time, I'm going to lean my hand in. So my hand is leaning in towards the inside of the pot as I pinch, and I'm pulling those outside coils over into the interior. I'm going back and pinching the wall thickness and pulling that clay the direction that I want it to go. Now at this point I've added about 7 or so rows of coils, and I'm ready to start smoothing and compressing the clay. And I'll use my metal rib, my metal flexible rib, and I'm going to smooth and compress the coils together. I'll support with my hand on the inside and smooth on the outside. Now if you remember, when we were pinching the outside up and pushing the inside down in this kind of a pinch. And so when I smooth on the exterior, I'm going to be moving mostly upwards to continue compressing those coils together in that same direction. So I'll hold my hand on the inside to support, and I'll flex this rib just a little bit, and I'll be compressing and smoothing those together. This is when you can compress the shape and also control the shape. So I'll move my way around, compressing and smoothing as I go. Sometimes I'll push outward from the inside if I notice that there's a divot or a dent in the form. I'm always supporting on the interior wherever I'm ribbing on the exterior. Now that I've smoothed and compressed the outside, I want to do the same to the inside. And I'm going to try to push the coils downward because when I was pinching them together, I was pinching them together in that motion where I was pushing the inside down and pulling the outside up. Sometimes it's difficult to do that. So even if you can smooth across or even up, but preferably down. Always supporting on the other side. Okay, and so every, say, 4 or 5 inches that you build, you'll want to smooth out, just like I did with the rib there. Now I'm going to continue building on this. But there is a point where the clay is too soft to support all the weight that you're adding by adding more coils. And especially if your form changes direction. The area where the form changes direction is holding a lot of weight of the clay that's above it. So as we coil build, we want to be mindful of how the clay is drying below and keeping this edge wet. We'll need to allow the bottom to set up and dry to suede or leather hard as we build, so this can become stronger and hold the weight of the clay above it. So let's say I'm at a point where I can't build any more because the clay down here is too soft and it needs time to set up. Well, I want to cover just the rim to allow this part of the pot to dry. So you'll take some scissors in a plastic bag and you'll cut strips that are about 3 or 4 inches wide of plastic. We'll use those strips to cover just the edge of our coil pot. So now that I have just the edge covered and the plastic is compressed tight against the clay, I can allow this to dry for some time out in the open air, and this part will set up, but this rim will stay soft. We need this rim to stay soft like the clay is just out of the bag in order for us to be able to pinch new coils onto it. Now, if I had built this much and I needed to leave for the day and I wanted to cover up my coil pot so I could work on it the next day I come in, I want to cover the rim with these strips of plastic really, really well, and then completely cover my piece with another big piece of plastic so that it won't dry out at all. Even if you cover your entire piece with plastic, but don't put strips of plastic on the rim will dry out too much and you won't be able to add new coils to it. Now let's say you forgot to cover the rim, or even with the plastic on, the rim dried a little bit. You come back into the studio to work and the rim of your pot is no longer tacky, moist clay. It's a little bit harder. You'll need to slip and score your next round of coils. You'll want to use your serrated rib and come in and score all the way around, and to score the inside and the top and the outside edge really well. Add some moisture using a sponge or some slip and score some more, just like if we were adding two pieces of clay together where you score and slip 3 times. Now your coils that you're going to be adding, those are soft and moist and fresh out of the bag because you just made them, so they don't need to be scored. But I've scored all the way around the edge, and I'm going to come in and add new coils and really make sure that I can compress and pinch that clay together really well. A few things to keep in mind with your coil piece is that we're always compressing and smoothing together. If you have certain textures or designs you want to add, you can smooth the clay out and compress it and then come back in and add all those textures. And you want to do that when the clay is in the right state. Since we're allowing the bottom to dry as we work our way up, you'll want to potentially add textures or designs to the bottom part before you're maybe even finished with the form completely at the top. As you're building and you're letting the piece dry towards the bottom, when it gets to leather hard, you should wrap plastic around just the bottom as you continue to build, so we can keep the whole piece leather hard, so it'll be ready for us to carve into or paint slip on or underglaze, depending on how we're planning on finishing it. Another thing is that you may find that your pinch pot or your coil pot gets too small at some point for you to reach in with the rib. If that's the case, use something like your wooden knife, this rounded edge, to reach in and smooth out those coils in the areas that you can't get your whole hand in. Another technique that I'd like to show you in conjunction with coil building is a technique that I call pinch building, or put clay where you want it. With a coil, we're constrained to building kind of like a 3D printer, where we're just adding each layer by layer by layer by layer all the way around the piece. But what if you have an area that is asymmetrical? It isn't this perfect round shape. You may want to build right in that area and not have to work all the way around as you're building. So with pinch building, you can put clay where you want it, not where the coil dictates. So you can just have your bag of clay next to you, and you take a pinch of clay out, and you'll make just what I call a pad of clay that's about a 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch thick. And then you'll put that on just like a coil, where you overlap and put it on the inside, and you'll pinch that pad in place. Just like a coil, but kind of a short coil. And there I've added some clay just to one area. Well, I can continue to build that way, where I take a piece of clay out, I create a pad, And then I can add that where I overlap the edges, overlapping the coil below it, putting that in place, pinching those together. Where they overlap, I'm pinching them down to that same thickness, that 3/8 thickness. Compressing the seams, changing that shape to match that asymmetrical shape that I have in my design. And then I can continue building this way. I can just build this whole area up. Depending on the direction that my form goes, I can decide if I overlap that pad on the inside or the outside. I just want to make sure it overlaps, and then I can pinch the two separate pieces of clay together and then sculpt those. So you can see how this allows for a much more free-form and asymmetrical type of building. I could build a whole structure here. I could then come in and add coils again. Maybe this part of my piece is just round and I continue that round part up to meet these, or I can piece build all the way around, pinch build all the way around. It's just important that you pinch those pieces together really well, just like they were coils. And sometimes I'll even line up a piece and see if it's the right shape. And maybe I'll take a piece off to make it a better shape that will fit inside there better. Pinch those pieces together. Now, just like with coil building, we want to compress all those walls together and come in and compress those seams together. Though some people really like the texture that's made by the different pieces or by the coils. As long as you've pinched together really, really well, you could leave those seams as long as it makes sense with your design. But the main thing is that you're really compressing that clay and pinching it together and maintaining an even thickness. You can smooth it together and compress. The more you compress clay, the stronger it will be and the less likelihood you'll have of cracks and things like that. Another thing to keep in mind is that as you're building this, it's soft clay that can be manipulated. Say you want there to be like multiple bumps on the outside of your piece. You can always come in and stretch the clay from the inside and create shapes by stretching, pushing out from the interior, or pushing in on the exterior. But you should always support on the other side when you're pushing, so you can really control the shape that you're making. And if you feel the coils come apart at all, you can smooth them together some more as you're changing the shapes. Another thing I'd like to show you is if you have an appendage, maybe a handle or a spout, or if you're making a figurative form and there's an arm or a leg, you can build the main body of the form, and then you can come in and cut a hole where your appendage is going to be. Pull that clay out, and then just like we did on the base where we made that lip, we're going to pinch this just like we pinched the lip where we created this place for the coil to be attached. Now for this area, it's quite a bit smaller, so maybe we'll use coils that are a bit skinnier. So I'll work with even smaller coils, and I'll attach that And then I can continue coil building out or pinch building. And that could coil to wherever I needed it to go. This is an example of where I might need to use a wooden tool to come in and smooth together those coils on the interior.